again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cowboys Overtime here on StarTelegram.com, brought to you by my good friends at Window Nation. Thank you very much, Window Nation. I am Fort Worth Star Telegram columnist Mac Engel, who will soon be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. He's Nick Harris, knower of all things Cowboys football and life. Nick, who's the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, you, Mac Engel, right? You see it. You see it right there. Dallas Cowboys head coach.
I've watched enough football. I played it on Madden, Nintendo, Atari, in television. I don't see why I'm not capable. I was on my 7th grade team, on my 8th grade team, a team that everybody got a letter, but 2. I'm one of the 2 that did not get a letter. Everybody got a letter, but 2 players but me. That's kind of my claim to fame on the football field. Nick, all right, let's get into it. Dallas Cowboys need a new head coach. It would appear that everybody is going to be considered. Who do you think right now, Thursday at 1:07 p.m. Central Time on January 16, who do you think the next head coach of the Cowboys is going to be?
Yeah, I put it out almost as soon as the news came down on my list of candidates, and I think it's wildly premature to say that there is a favorite right now, but I would say the leader is Kellen Moore, and I think Kellen Moore makes a lot of sense for various reasons. I'm going to have a piece later today in the Star Telegram just talking about Kellen Moore, why it could go right, why it could go wrong. I think why it could go right is you're pairing Kellen Moore with Dak Prescott once again, someone he has a lot of comfortability with, a lot of experience with. They were successful with each other. They did a lot of good things together when Kellen Moore was the OC. They have a deep understanding already, so you'd be hitting the ground more than running. You would be marathon running at that point because those guys are so in sync with each other. Now, what could go wrong in that sense is there's questions whenever he left Dallas in 2022 about his ability to command a room, his ability to lead a room. Can he be a voice and can he be a presence in the locker room that players will overall respect? I think he would have to answer those questions in an interview, which sounds like it's going to happen tomorrow.
So the other coaches that the Cowboys have put into interview include longtime assistant coach Leslie Frazier. He's in Buffalo now. They're going to have to interview him pretty quickly because the Bills play this weekend. Also on the list is former New York Jets head coach and former San Francisco 49ers assistant Robert. How do I pronounce his name? Is it Saleh or
Saleh?
Saleh. Okay, that's what I thought. Robert Saleh. Kellen Moore, obviously, and also in the mix, but people that have not been formally interviewed include current Colorado Buffaloes head coach Deion Sanders and Liberty Christian, it's a high school here in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area, head coach Jason Witten. Let's talk about the other guys first. Leslie Frazier is a minority candidate, so teams do have to satisfy the Rooney Rule. I got in a little bit of I would say a very respectful conversation this week with the Cowboys about what qualifies as meeting the guidelines and the specifications of what a Rooney Rule interview is, which has to be face-to-face. I'm of a mind that because I've seen this before, you really don't have to do it face-to-face, but they're going to do it. What would you put Leslie Frazier's chances are of being the Cowboys head coach?
Yeah, just quick note, Leslie Frazier, the associate head coach in Seattle right now.
Seattle, did I say Buffalo?
Yeah. So he's free to
he can talk whenever. I have Buffalo.
Sounds like that will happen on Saturday.
Okay.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry. It sounds like that will happen on Monday afternoon in Dallas. Now, potential of being a head coach, I don't necessarily see that. And I think them knocking out Robert Saleh and Leslie Frazier in the first weekend is interesting because you knock out both of your Rooney Rule minority candidate requirements. So that gives them the flexibility, theoretically, to hire a head coach as soon as Monday night. Now, will that happen? Probably not. But I do find it interesting that they've knocked out both of the Rooney Rule interviews fairly early on, and that they are both guys who would make a lot of sense for a defensive coordinator. I think with Robert Saleh, if you brought him in under the pretense of, hey, this is a head coach interview, it works for both sides. But really, you're evaluating it as a DC. And does that mean that they already have their guy in mind? And is that guy an offensive-minded head coach? It gets the wheels turning for me, at least. But looking at Leslie Frazier specifically in a vacuum, you look at what he did in Minnesota ahead of Mike Zimmer getting there. There's some track record as far as, whether it be his time in Seattle, his time in other stops in the league. He's got a ton of experience. What can he do as a defensive coordinator? That's largely a question mark just because he hasn't called defensive plays in a while. He hasn't called defensive plays in a long time. So what would that look like? I think that would be part of the interview process. And I do find it interesting that these two, that the Joneses decided to reach out to him. Now, Robert Saleh, that is a very fascinating candidate. And earlier this week when the news broke that Mike McCarthy would not be returning, I put out my ideal staff, and I put head coach Pete Carroll, offensive coordinator Josh McCown, defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. And I think if Saleh was here as a defensive coordinator, it could be good, because not only for development purposes, he developed guys like Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner. He's drafted and developed these guys, DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner, Will McDonald. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
So his ability to protect, have a great defensive fronts, and he's had 4 top 5 defenses over the course of his time as a coordinator. So I think there's a lot to like about Robert Saleh as a coordinator, but as a head coach, 20-36 overall record. He's had 4 seasons, and his highest finish in the AFC East was 3rd place. They need a guy who has postseason winning experience. This guy hasn't even been to the postseason. So they would have to figure out how to get over that if they were really thinking about bringing him in as a head coach.
Well, there's 2 things on that. The first one is the idea that they are interviewing coaches, head coaching candidates, but really it's more of a familiarity so they can potentially hire them as a coordinator. Mm-hmm. And I went through that when the Cowboys, Bill Parcells left, and they interviewed everybody and their brother. One of whom was Ron Rivera. And Ron had been the defensive coordinator with the Chicago Bears when they went to the Super Bowl and ultimately lost against Peyton Manning and the Colts. And Ron Rivera preferred a specific defensive scheme. He was a 3-4 guy, if I remember. I think that's right. I think he was a 3-4 guy. And I remember talking to him in that process. And I told him before he interviewed, I said, tell him you'll run the 4-3. Tell him you'll run the 4-3. He says, well, I can't. I said, that's what they've drafted for, so you better tell him that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I may have flip-flopped it, but I'm pretty sure it was or maybe it was a 3-4. I can't remember. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The point was they were interviewing Rivera more or less as a potential defensive coordinator to go with whomever their head coach was, who ultimately was Wade Phillips. And in that process, the first interview they did, Nick, after Bill left, was Jason Garrett. The guy they wanted to hire was Jason Garrett first as the offensive coordinator, and then they were going to tell whomever was going to be the head coach, he's your offensive coordinator, so you're going to have to agree to it, which Wade did. Wade had no problem with that. And so if you're telling me that Leslie Frazier and Robert Saleh are coming here, most likely as coordinator candidates, that tracks.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the one thing that I think is really unfair to Robert Saleh is evaluating his ability as a head coach because he was with the Jets. There's only a couple of teams that you can sit there and say, well, it's really hard to say how he would have done had he been in a different situation other than that franchise. Because there's like 3 or 4 of them where you would say, well, you kind of have to take the franchise into consideration when you evaluate that head coach. And I think the Jets right now, I can't think of another one. Can you think, Nick, of a franchise right now that is any more dysfunctional than the Jets?
I would look at Vegas.
Yep.
Vegas has just had issues for like the last 5 years. But yeah, the Jets
keep going longer than that. You're being
Browns. I think the Browns have a lot of dysfunction right now. But yeah, the Jets are certainly up there. Certainly.
So I think when you look at Robert's resume, you have to take that in consideration. So if he comes in here and blows you away, now I agree. If you're trying to sell this to a fan base, selling 20-36 and no playoff success at all, that's going to be tough.
No playoff appearances, much less success.
Yes, playoff appearances.
Yeah.
The Leslie Frazier one, did I mix that up? God, I'm getting old. Was he not in Buffalo?
He may have been. Mac,
okay.
To be honest, he's in Seattle right now. That's
you're right. And I flip-flop all that stuff. So let's go down the list. Kellen Moore, you talk about, to me, the issue with Kellen Moore is one, I've interviewed him. He's a really nice guy. I don't know how much of a dynamic personality he is, Yeah. He reminds me somewhat of the Jason Garrett type, which is good, bad. And I don't know if you had a chance to see it this week, but Jason Garrett made an appearance on a podcast where he gave a great detailed explanation on the pros and cons of being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And one of them was the management situation. And if you read through what Jason was saying, and he was about as honest there as I've ever heard him, which is you have to manage down as much as you have to manage up in that job. But that was a very good answer. It was a very honest answer. And there was a couple of sentences or two of some criticisms of Jerry. You have to kind of, read through it, Nick. But to me, the Kellen Moore hire is an extension of Jason Garrett, which wasn't bad. But to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong, this is a Dak hire, if that's who they go with.
Yeah, they're trying to maximize the 4 years that they know Dak is under contract, that they know they have left with him. Mm-hmm. Why not pair it with a guy who he's had his best success with? You look at that 2020 season before Dak got hurt. Yeah, he was averaging 300. Sorry, my dog's flapping his ears.
It's okay.
He has big ears. They just flap.
Just like Dumbo.
He was averaging around 315 passing yards per game. I mean, throwing it out of the stadium in some instances. And then you look at whenever he returned health-wise in 2021, 2021 I felt like was the best opportunity Mike McCarthy had to get to a Super Bowl. You look at all the pieces that they had in place, the health they had in place. It worked out great for them in that season. They just couldn't execute in that home playoff game against the 49ers.
You thought that team – I'm curious. I'm gonna stop you real quick. You thought that 21 team was a better chance for him to go to the Super Bowl than the 22 team that got to the divisional round and barely lost at San Francisco?
Yeah, hindsight's 2020, but yes. Okay. Just because I felt like Dak's turnovers were eventually going to hurt them in that sense, and Dak was not 100% healthy in 22 either. So I factor that in as well. But that 21 season I felt like was their best shot. But that obviously hindsight's 2020 there. But I think pairing Kellen with Dak gives them both comfortability, and it's not asking Dak to play with a new coordinator again. And that's one less year that they're going to have with Dak, and they know there's a feeling around that building about his injury proneness, and they want to maximize the time that they know that they have left. And right now they don't know how much that time is.
Okay. So let's go down the other two candidates that we know of that are being circulated out there. Deion Sanders has made it known in the past he wants to stay in Boulder and he does not want to coach in the NFL. Jerry Jones called him almost immediately after the Mike McCarthy news broke. Deion didn't say no. He does come with a significant buyout of his contract at Colorado. He has hired other coaches or promoted them since this news came out. It has not been a formal interview, although I don't know how much of an interview is going to be required in this particular case because everybody knows him. It would be interesting. I don't think it's a great idea for a lot of reasons, but what are your thoughts on Deion being the next head coach of the Cowboys, Nick?
I want to put this as a precursor to what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Deion Sanders is not going to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. You can clip me. You can quote me.
I've said the same thing. We're not the only ones saying that.
Yeah. But I think what he could bring to Dallas, theoretically, I think he could bring a high culture. He'd be a CEO guy that wouldn't, come in expecting to be calling plays. I think he would hire a hell of a staff. I do, because he's done that in Colorado. He's built an NFL staff in Colorado, and that's why they are succeeding. It's because they have pieces in place that have done it before and have coached at a high level and are developing these kids the right way. I think that would translate to the NFL level. But as far as, his message, his coaching style, how would that translate to an NFL locker room? I'm not sure that's the best thing for Deion. And I think Deion understands that. And that's why I don't think it's going to happen.
Is there any way that if they wanted it to happen, you've got a significant buyout?
Yeah.
And I've had athletic directors tell me buyouts are just for fans. Usually they're waived. And then I've had other college athletic directors who say, no, you put that buyout there in there for a reason.
Yeah.
I've seen coaches finance buyouts themselves sometimes. I do not think Deion Sanders will finance a buyout himself. I do not think Jerry Jones will pay a buyout to hire a head coach. Is there any scenario where and the reason I'm throwing this out, Nick, is my former colleague here at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, she's now a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. She writes for Pro Football Talk. Great football knowledge. Shereen Williams. Shereen threw it out. If you could throw out to Netflix or Amazon Prime that you could do an all-access show, they would finance the buyout. I can't think of a scenario where you would have a more fascinating duo after a game where Jerry Jones is talking to the media and Deion's talking to the media. I mean, there would be real competition on. You'd have to make up your mind as a reporter, like, where am I going? Because both these guys may say anything.
Hey, I'm pro chaos. I want.
Oh, this would be it. I mean, this would be unlike anything we've seen. And I covered the Bill Parcells thing was really interesting because he was the voice you wanted to go to in that scenario, more so than even Jerry. And this would be some kind of, sequel to that. Any part of you think, well, maybe that could happen?
One thing that I keep coming back to is I respect Adam Schefter as a reporter. And these national guys, there's a lot of them I do respect. And I think there's also some that, talk, for people sometimes. I don't think Adam Schefter is one of those guys. And Adam Schefter throughout this week has said, hey, look, I don't think Deion's going to be the head coach, but I got a call from a GM in October of 2023 that said, get out your notebook right now and write down Deion Sanders is going to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And he said it like 3 or 4 times this week. And that's one thing that keeps popping back into my mind. Is it realistic? I don't think so. I have a lot of college people at Colorado and have understanding of Deion's thought processes that do not think that he is going to leave Boulder. Now, granted, there were people at Jackson State who thought the exact same thing. So, things happen. It is prime time we're talking about. But I don't see it as a reality.
Coaches leave. That's just in their DNA. And I know Deion has said, my kickstand's down here in Boulder and I love it. He has said he does not want to coach NFL players. He told Jock Taylor, longtime DFW Cowboys voice, someone you and I both have a great deal of respect for, who knows Deion personally, wrote a book with him when he was at Jackson State. Jock has said he's just not an NFL coach. But coaches leave. And they leave. So it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. The mistake that I think he would be making is that he has complete autonomy in Boulder right now. That's worth a lot. And in an NFL locker room, you're not going to have it. You don't. Guys are making a ton of money. Guys have their own agendas. He was the same way. I mean, he was the exact same way when he played. So he would know. And, in terms of what he's going to do at Colorado, I don't know what the ceiling is there. Big 12 teams have a lower ceiling than the SEC or Big 10. But I think in terms of autonomy and the fact that he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, he should stay at Colorado. And I'm sure the idea of being the Dallas Cowboys head coach is awfully enticing. It's awfully enticing. But I think ultimately, he will stay. All right, let's hit on this one more topic with a little bit more hindsight now. Nick, Mike McCarthy is now interviewing for other jobs in the NFL, including the Chicago Bears most recently. He's also talked to the New Orleans Saints. I've been on record since the last game of the season. I think he should be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. With a little bit more hindsight, why don't you ultimately think there was a 6th season and beyond for Mike McCarthy here with the Cowboys?
I think there was impatience growing between both sides, but specifically McCarthy in the last year of being here. He went on the record stating that he was not pleased with how, him and his coaches went into a contract year. It was not the preferred way of doing things, created a lot of challenges, he said on the record. And I think eventually as those talks started happening last week between McCarthy and Jerry Jones, there was even more impatience growing within those conversations. And then it got to a point Monday where McCarthy, brought it to the forefront himself and wasn't met with a great response from the Joneses, and McCarthy decided to split ways from that point. I think in the end, it was impatience. And I think it was a lack of trust from ownership, because if you had more trust in McCarthy, you would have extended him last year.
I agree.
And I think there was a lot of pause last year after the loss to Green Bay. And I think we can all look back at hindsight, obviously, and see that was really the end of the Mike McCarthy tenure, because that decided to put all of the coaches on a 1-year expiring deal. It created a lot of challenges. And then from there, free agency happened. From there, a bad season this year. From there, it was bad. So I think they should have made the decision this time last year if Mike McCarthy was their guy or not, and they decided that he was not, and it led to this reality.
I like Mike McCarthy. I think he's a pretty good guy. I thought he was a good coach. I don't know if he's that much different than necessarily Jason Garrett, but obviously he was a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little bit. The thing that hit me, I don't know when it was, Nick. I don't know if he ever fit the Dallas Cowboys. I always thought he was a little bit of a peculiar guy to put in that job. And now that he's gone, I can say with some clarity, I just don't know if he was ever, it never really looked like a good fit. And maybe, because I got so accustomed to seeing him in Green Bay, but it seemed to me that he was just an odd duck with the Dallas Cowboys. You were around him a lot more than I was. Do you think he fit as a Cowboy?
I think initially it made sense to hire him because you had a guy in Green Bay when he was in Green Bay who didn't have a lot of control. Green Bay, they draft, the front office drafts on their own. They don't take a lot of head coach input when it comes to adding personnel. It's very much just front office influence. The head coach is asked to show up to training camp, get the guys ready to play, and make sure that they win on Sundays. And, it made sense on the surface whenever he interviewed with the Cowboys. Hey, this is my experience. The Joneses to look at that and be like, well, we're asking him to do the same thing here. If anything, we're actually going to give him a little bit more influence because he had more influence when it came to draft decisions and things like that. And it was eventually something that I think was a little uncomfortable for Mike at a certain point. But I think looking at, him being a fit in Dallas, you could definitely see by the end that his personality and how he goes about things was certainly not what you would expect from a Dallas Cowboys head coach, just because he's more reserved. He's kind of laid back, and he had a lot of pressure, especially in that last year. People were asking him about his job once a week in press conferences, and he did not like answering those questions. He didn't like dealing with it. And so I think by a certain point, it became not a good fit because there was too much spotlight on Mike McCarthy, when in reality, he's not the spotlight guy.
This has been said 1,000 times. Million times, that ultimately the problem with the Dallas Cowboys is not the head coach nor whomever they hire, but rather the general manager. Troy Aikman made a point of saying it on Monday Night Football, the playoff game, that he doesn't believe this is a coveted job anymore, more or less inferring that Jerry Jones is the problem with the success or lack thereof of the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know how anybody can say otherwise at this point. And the problem is that they haven't been bad. They haven't been bad. They have drafted well. They've had good seasons. They've had occasionally really solid, even great runs under Jason Garrett, under Bill Parcells, under Wade, and for a hot minute or two under Mike McCarthy. It just never happened in January. And that was why I think that's always kind of your get out of jail free card if you don't want to hammer Jerry. I said, well, they're close. Nick, is it as simple to say that the reason the Cowboys are not back in an NFC Championship game and haven't been since Barry Switzer is Jerry?
Is there any other team in the NFL who's gone 30 years with the same GM and no Super Bowls? No championship game appearances?
Nope.
Absolutely not. And I think at the end of the day, you have to look at certain decisions that are made and see that there's a trail back to that GM office / owner office / all things Dallas Cowboys office, and it is Jerry Jones. Yeah, and I think he's a big part of the problem in Dallas. Anybody would tell you that, and it's understood, but you have to live with it. So how do you live with it? You hope that you draft and develop well. It's a guy like Will McClay continuing to do his job, and you hope that you have the right coach on the sideline on Sundays. And that yes, that's a decision that Jerry Jones does make, but I think at the end of the day, whoever he does put out there, it's on them to be able to get them over the hump. And Jerry's going to be the problem whether you like it or not. He's going to be there. You got to learn how to win around it.
All right, we've got some more things to talk about here on Cowboys Overtime, but first, let's hear from our friends at Window Nation.
Window Nation, the star of window replacement and proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys, can help you fill the house this season with savings. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and make no interest payments for 60 months, 5 full years. Fill your house for a customized authentic Dallas Cowboys jersey while supplies last. You could even help fill the Cowboys house and win tickets to a game. Visit windownation.com/Cowboys now for details. Call 866-95-NATION. Window Nation, proud partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Thank you very much, Window Nation. Back here on StarTelegram.com for Cowboys Overtime. I am Mac Engel. He is Nick Harris. We are going to break off from Cowboys Talk to talk a few more football topics, and we're going to begin with the final game of the college season. That is on Monday night, the national championship game, the Ohio State Buckeyes versus the Notre Dame Fighting Amish. We're going to talk about this very briefly. Ohio State opened as a 9.5-point favorite. You and I watched Ohio State defeat Texas last Friday night in the Cotton Bowl. Is there any scenario, Mr. Harris, where you see Ohio State losing?
Yes, I think there is.
Really? All right. Well, sling me. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I think Notre Dame is it's a different Notre Dame team, and they proved that to me in the Orange Bowl. I was talking last week, so I'm talking out of both ends of myself here. But
it's a lot better that way. You're never wrong. So keep
never
going.
wrong. Yeah, I
Right,
can point back to
you're always a
and be
winner.
like, see, I was right. Right, I think they proved to me in the Orange Bowl last week they can play in tight competitive games and they can be physical. And I think the physicality was something I questioned going into the Penn State game. I was wrong. I mean, they got some big guys on both sides of the ball that I think are really helping pave the way for their skill guys. Jeremiah Love at running back's insane. I think he's a guy who could have a big day, but they got to get through that defensive front for Ohio State. Eventually, Texas cracked, and it was because of that Ohio State defensive front. If they can keep things solid up front, then I think they do have a shot at winning this. Yes, but I would be taking Ohio State for sure.
Would you take Ohio State to cover?
What's the line again?
The last time I checked, it was 9.5.
Oh, no.
It's not quite TCU, Georgia, but still.
What was that line? Like 13?
I think it was 14.
Oh, man.
And you know what? Georgia barely covered it. So.
Yeah, exactly. 14 times 14.
Right.
I don't think that they cover that. I think it's a one-score game.
I think the only way that they're going to win this game, and they're pretty beat up right now. And that's one thing about this, in terms of evaluating draft prospects. One of the things that we've said forever is that NFL rookies hit walls. Well, guys who are now playing in playoffs and things like that, they're playing 14, 15, 16 game schedules now. So I think that learning curve is going to be shortened considerably for guys who go down this road. Notre Dame is missing one of its best offensive linemen. He got hurt against Penn State. Knapp, he's not going to play. They're going to get more plays out of the quarterback position at Ohio State than they are Notre Dame. I don't think Riley Leonard's blowing away anybody with his ability as a thrower. But as a competitor, as a guy who can move the ball by any means, he impresses you. But I think you're right. I think Notre Dame can cover and make it competitive. I just see more plays out of certainly the running back position, the skill position, at Ohio State. Even though Texas did a decent job of taking some of those guys away, I just think Ohio State has too much, and I think they'll win.
I will say,
yes,
I am for chaos, as I've mentioned before.
Yep.
Northern Illinois would be the worst transitive property national champion since Virginia Tech in 2014. So I am very much excited for that potential.
Northern Illinois championship.
Further back, Northern Illinois might be the worst transitive property national champion ever.
What did they finish? Did they even finish with a winning record?
They made a bowl game, but it wasn't necessarily close.
Like a 6-6 bowl game kind of appearance.
Yeah, but I'll fact check this while you move on to the next topic here.
Okay, well then the next topic stems from the Cotton Bowl, and that is we have a local kid who has gone pro, former South Lake Carroll Dragon quarterback by way of Ohio State and now the University of Texas. Quinn Ewers made it official, what we suspected going into Friday night's game, that he is turning pro. He started his career at Ohio State, didn't work out, transferred to Texas, had a very nice career. Not perfect, but a very nice career, including the last 2 seasons where he led the Longhorns to back-to-back playoff appearances, including a playoff win this most recent run against Clemson, and very competitive games, losses against Washington, and most recently against Ohio State. Now, this guy's future has been announced since he was a junior in high school. He was a hell of a player. He was a 5-star kid. He's one of the first pioneer types in the NIL world, gets a contract, gets a lot of money, goes to Ohio State, doesn't work, comes back to Texas, is getting paid, and he's a good player. I think he's caught a lot of heat that he didn't necessarily deserve, but he's a good player. Now the question is, this guy has gone all over draft boards, number 1 to number 459 or whatever. Nick, you love covering the draft. Where do you see Quinn Ewers going? Not necessarily predicting his NFL future, but where do you see him being picked in this spring's NFL draft?
Really quick, Northern Illinois, 8-5 this past
8-5, hell of a team.
For Quinn Ewers, there is going to be a team that drafts him in the first round.
Okay, so you see him as a day 1 first round guy.
I think eventually, yes. I think if we're talking right now, we're looking second, third round. But I think he's going to have the J.J. McCarthy kind of rise that he had last year in the draft process. Right. Exactly. And then eventually finishes, with a pretty high grade. Someone is going to see the traits that Quinn Ewers has. They're going to see the arm talent that he has. I think he has the best arm talent in the draft, period.
More so than Shador, Cam Ward, any of those guys?
Okay. I think so. When you talk about his ability to get the ball out of various different angles, how he can get different pass catchers involved, his ability to push the ball downfield. Now, granted, he's going to have to learn a little touch, but his ability to push the ball downfield, I think he's got the best arm talent in the class. I think it's really elite, his arm talent. It's his ability to manage pressure. It's his ability to, escape the pocket and use his legs and figure out how to do that. He hasn't done that the same since he took that hit from Dallas Turner in his sophomore year at Texas. And he needs to go to a place where he can sit and marinate for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And I think if he's under the right development, he could be an NFL quarterback.
You're saying, so wait a minute, let's go back. The hit you're talking about is when they played Alabama in Austin.
Yes.
And he's doing really, really well. And Dallas Turner, the linebacker for Alabama, lays him out.
Yep.
And he broke his clavicle. Is that the injury?
He sprained his AC joint, but it was a bad AC joint injury.
Okay. And the one thing that I've really worried about for him as a young person, he has not stayed healthy. Yeah. And if you're not staying healthy when you're in college and your body's and you're young, it's gonna be tough in the pros. I'm not saying he can't, but it's a challenge. And
his last year in high school, he had a sports hernia and a groin injury that kept him out for 10 games. So it goes all the way back to his days at Carroll.
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting thing that you said is that he's a first-round pick, but in order for this to work, he's got to sit.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of rookies, first-round picks who are sitting.
Yeah.
I mean, anymore these days, the way teams are built, you're drafting for need, and you're plugging in holes, and you're expecting day one starters out of first, second, third, maybe even up to fifth sometimes round draft pick, depending on the position. You and I both know, in order to be a successful NFL quarterback, a lot of things have got to go right. You got to be good. You got to be healthy. Teams got to be invested in you, blah, 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 blah. When you put that kind of sort of stipulation on him and his success, I can't think of a team, Nick, where they're going to spend a first round pick and then say, sit for 2 years. Can you?
I have one.
Good. Go ahead. Shoot.
The Los Angeles Rams.
Okay. Yeah, that's not bad. Stafford and certainly Sean McVay, I won't throw that out. All right.
And I think if they understand that Stafford, probably has a couple of years left in the tank, draft Quinn Ewers, let him develop under Sean McVay, and have him take over the reins whenever Stafford moves on to higher sunsets in Highland Park. Let it happen.
All right, I'll sit there and that will be a fascinating one to watch.
Yeah,
and it's certainly one that I think he got a lot of undue criticism. It's a 21-year-old guy, and I think Texas fans will look back eventually fondly at his career because he, more than Sam Ehlinger, brought Texas back to a level that they had not seen since the days of Colt McCoy. Okay, last topic.
If I could.
Shoot.
One stat that I think Texas fans should always remember when it comes to Quinn Ewers, especially given the context of the last 15 years in Austin, he was 17-0 as a starter against unranked teams.
Yeah, and Texas really did a great job against unranked teams for a long time. And I'm being facetious. I mean, they lost to a lot of unranked teams.
Yeah.
So and they did, and he had big wins.
Yeah.
Clemson, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Alabama, in Tuscaloosa. And I know there was a bunch of other ones. He had a lot of big wins. And I still don't think he got enough credit for that. And I don't, it'll take some time. He'll get it eventually, but he was a really nice player for a team that was really, really good the last 2 years. They just didn't win the national championship. NFL playoffs are down to their final 8. The divisional round starts on Saturday. You ready for some prediction time?
Let's do it.
Okay. On Saturday in the AFC, the Houston Texans advanced on to play the Kansas City Chiefs, which have not played their starters since Christmas. The Chiefs right now are going for the very rare and unprecedented three-peat as Super Bowl champions and are favored. You know this one?
No, I don't.
8.5.
Interesting.
8.5. Now, Houston has played a playoff game in Kansas City before. That was with Deshaun Watson, where they raced out to a huge lead, only to eventually get blown out by Patrick Mahomes. Houston had they obviously had a nice playoff win last week. I don't. Kansas City, I'm convinced, you and I've talked about it, I'm convinced Kansas City's run's going to end in this playoffs. I don't see them losing this one. Do you?
Yeah, me neither. I think they take care of business here.
Do you think they cover?
Yes. Yes.
I think you're right. All right. The other game on Saturday is, of course, in the AFC. The Washington Commanders will play at the Fighting Dan Campbells, the Detroit Lions. The Lions are favored by 9.5. They had the bye because they beat the Vikings in that regular season finale. So the Lions are coming off of a nice bye week. Washington had a nice playoff win, something that they had not done in however many years, by barely winning in Tampa. But they are on with Jaden Daniels. Anyway, you see Washington beating the heavily favored Lions.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm taking the Lions, and I'm taking them to cover.
I think you're right. I think Jaden Daniels and Washington are going to be a big problem for the Cowboys in the future, but I don't think they're going to be a problem for the Lions on Saturday in Detroit. Sunday, let's move on. The Los Angeles Rams are playing at Kellen Moore's Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are favored by 6. Rams have looked really good of late. They pulled off the upset I predicted when they upset the Sam Darnold Minnesota Vikings, pretty much ruining Sam's chances of getting a monster contract, by the way. Eagles are looking pretty good. Who do you like?
This feels like a game the Eagles would lose, but I am going to take the Eagles. I don't think they cover, though.
I really like the way the Rams are playing.
I do too.
They've really done a great job of retooling after that Super Bowl team that lost Aaron Donald and some of those other guys, Jalen Ramsey. Their receivers are terrific. I think it's going to be more weather dependent. If the weather's decent, I'm going to say the Rams are going to win. If it's hellishly cold, give me the Eagles. All right, last one. Certainly the game of the day, game of the weekend. Baltimore is at Buffalo. Buffalo is giving 1 point, or is getting 1 point, rather. They're getting 1 point. That's a shock. This should be a hell of a game. I'm really excited about this. Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. You know, both of these teams have been sitting on winners for a while, but they just haven't broken through with their respective quarterbacks and these respective cores. Who do you like?
Ravens are my Super Bowl pick. I'm riding them here too.
I'm going to be wrong on this. Give me Buffalo.
Yeah.
I'm biased for our boss. Steve Kaufman is a big Bills fan. He's from that part of the country, so I know that's like no. I mean, I am a Bengals guy, so I'm just thinking Josh Allen. I really like Josh Allen, and you know, if there's any player out there who has something to prove in the playoffs, I can't think of one that has more to prove than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. Well, Josh Allen, I think, has some too. I think he has some there too. Because if they lose in the divisional round here, you would almost have to think Buffalo's going to start looking around being like, what are we doing wrong? Because we've got all these great teams and we can't even get to the Super Bowl, much less win one.
You know, at least they got to a conference championship game they barely lost.
Yep.
The home game when they hosted Cincinnati in the snow, that was the one to me that was a big disappointment. Cincinnati, they should have beaten Cincinnati. Yep. But I think the other thing too is these are kind of like NBA teams in the 90s that kept running against Michael Jordan's Bulls. Yep. You had a lot of great players who were denied because of that team. All right. Absolutely. We've talked too long. Be sure to keep checking StarTelegram.com and Nick's great work for your latest Cowboys head coaching news, because it is coming fast and furious. Nick, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Window Nation, StarTelegram.com. See you next week.